All right, schistosomiasis is probably everyone's favorite liver disease. I think probably because it's a fun disease name to say, and it also kind of has an interesting appearance to it. But schistosomiasis is, again, not super common in the US, so we might see it if somebody has traveled from another country into the US, but it's still important to see what the clinical symptoms are, who's more at risk for developing it, and what it looks like on ultrasound. So schistosomiasis comes by a couple other names. Bilharzia. Bilharzia is named after the doctor who discovered schistosomiasis, and then it's also called snail fever, which you'll find out why in a second here. But it is a parasitic infection that occurs in the urinary and GI tract. So there are two different ways that the infection can get into the body, and it's either going to live in the intestines or it's going to live in the bladder. The infection that lives in the bladder is typically going to stay there, where the GI tract infection is the one that's most likely going to infect the liver. So I mentioned earlier that this is not very common in the US, and it is more common in endemic countries. Endemic countries are going to have poor water sanitation, or they're going to have communal bathing areas such as like rivers or lakes. Let's take a look at the schistosomiasis life cycle. So we know that humans are the host and that the parasite likes to live in the colon or in the bladder. And when the infected person is out in water, maybe they're swimming or bathing, they might defecate or urinate into the water. And when that happens, the parasite and eggs are shed through the urine and the feces. So now these parasites are out in the water, they're going to lay eggs are going to hatch, and those eggs are going to look for snails. And that's why they call this snail fever. So the eggs infect a snail, they start to grow within the snail, and then they're going to bust out of the snail, and now they have tails to swim with. And so these little swimming parasites are now going to look for their human host again. So anybody who's out in the water, swimming or bathing, the parasite will penetrate the skin, they drop their tail, and now they're small enough to circulate through the body. And so they're going to circulate around until they land either in the bladder or in the colon. That's where they are going to become adults. The adults mate and lay eggs, and those eggs then are small enough, especially from the colon parasites, those eggs are small enough then to transverse the portal venous system, where they end up floating up to the liver. Since the initial infection begins with the parasites penetrating the skin, we see a lot of skin symptoms. So they're going to have these little dots or rash with itchy skin all over their arms, legs, body. And then after that happens, then the other infectious symptoms are going to occur. So that's fever, chills, cough, all of that. Once the eggs start to multiply within the colon, that might start to cause some belly pain and some muscle aches. Late stage signs then are when the eggs have gone up to the liver and have started to block things off. And so what we typically see with late stage schistosomiasis are very similar to cirrhosis or to portal hypertension, because these eggs have basically blocked off the whole portal venous system. They've created this big mass of eggs in there. So we'll see splenomegaly along with that, varices and ascites start to form. Let's take a look at what this looks like on ultrasound. Again, not lots of pictures that show schistosomiasis well, but there are a few things that we want to know about it. So the parasites cause damage to the portal system and the surrounding liver tissue. All this damage that occurs is going to end up in fibrosis. And so what we can typically see with schistosomiasis is the fibrotic changes on the liver. This example shows us the mosaic polygons in the liver parenchyma of fibrosis. More commonly, though, we are going to see that fibrotic change near the portal veins and the porta hepatis. When we see those fibrotic changes, they're going to appear very bright, making the portal vein walls appear thick. And this picture is actually really hard to see. It was the only picture that I could find that shows the eggs within the portal vein system. But as the parasite eggs travel up to the liver, they kind of glom together and they can block up that portal vein system. And that is when we're going to start to see those portal hypertension symptoms occur, such as the splenomegaly, ascites, and varicosities. And that'll appear as echogenic material within the portal vein. So schistosomiasis, kind of a fun one. Remember that it has two other names. Remember who is at risk for developing schistosomiasis and what changes it causes in the liver and how to describe it by ultrasound terms.